I used to be an academic, and 2 years ago when I was still trying to play the publish or perish game, I had set up a transatlantic collaboration. It sounded really good to my boss. I got to go to England, and I was going to be working with a woman there who was a senior to me. She was more established and more published and all of the things that you need when you're an academic. And she and I were going to spend 2 weeks together to sort of see if we could put together a research project. And I knew that it was going to be 2 really, really intense weeks of like writing and schmoozing and administration, and I knew that I was going to need a break at the end of it, so I booked 3 nights at a bed and breakfast in rural Wales. And by the end of 2 weeks of writing and talking about my writing and thinking and talking about my thinking and thinking about my writing and writing about my thinking, I was ready for a B&B. And the only thing between my R&R and P&Q was a 4-hour drive on the wrong side of the road. Now, I don't know how many of you have experienced driving in the United Kingdom. I experience it as a war between my body and my brain, where my body is saying, dude, why are you trying to kill me? And my brain is going, because everybody else is driving on this side of the road. You know, because like every fiber of your being, 40 years of lived experience in this country, teach you that driving on the left side of the road is a sure path to head-on collision and then death. You know, so you're driving and then like suddenly you kind of get lulled into a false sense of security and then you remember, like I'm about to die, right? So it's this peak of adrenaline and then crash, peak and crash and peak and crash. I was exhausted by the time I arrived at the B&B, and my hostess, she told me, I looked to her like I could use a little bit of a stroll. And she says to me, bring this, and hands me this piece of laminated paper. I learned very quickly why it was laminated, for me to go take a little walk in the fog, in the misty fog. And I thought this would be perfect. You know, I was sort of in a fog of ideas and immersed myself in this fog. She told me that this walk would be a 5-mile stroll, culminating in a pub on a little canal, and then I could have my pint and my meal, and then I could call a cab home, and to me that sounded just about perfect. But she says, you must understand. She explains to me that the way that the paths, these walking paths work, is that they're council maintained, but they go through private lands, okay? So periodically you're walking on a road, but then you like come into somebody's garden, you know, and you walk through this path. Like you can see it's clearly marked. There's a little sign, and you walk on through, and if there's a gate, you close it, right? That seemed reasonable enough. So I started off on my meditative stroll, and soon enough I was lost in thought, and I started thinking back on these past 2 weeks and realizing that something was really not right about me and academia, specifically this like battle with publishing that I had been having. And I went back, I started thinking about the 6 years since I'd had my PhD and the 6 years while I was pursuing my PhD, and I realized at the very, very beginning I knew it. Like I had immediately cued into this territoriality about ideas that was completely antithetical to what I thought the world of ideas was going to be about. I thought it was going to be about sharing and like discussing and collaborating, and you bring an idea and I bring an idea. And meanwhile, I had spent the last 2 weeks fighting with this academic about who was going to have first authorship. That's what research ended up looking like. You know, whose name goes first, right? Because you can do alphabetical, but then if you break alphabetical order, people know that someone did more of the work and someone had better ideas and better data and better analysis and a stronger voice. And, you know, I was just kind of starting to see that maybe I would have come to the realization then. I did about a year later that I needed to leave this world, but at that moment I was sort of jolted back into my present moment because I was confronted with the last paddock. I had come up to the last field that I was to cross, and I could see the pub off in the distance. And sure enough, I could see the little signpost. I looked at my laminated paper, I could see the path. But at this field, a herd of cattle had come to greet me. And they were all like sniffing eagerly. And this was strange because at that point I'd gone through about 5 or 6 fields and passed about 100 cows, none of which could have been bothered in the least by the presence of this solitary human. But this group were really interested. And I thought, well, it's the hour, right? Like, it's dinner time. I'm hungry. They must be hungry. Once they realize I don't have food, they're going to lose interest in me. You see, most of my knowledge of bovine-human interaction is derived from petting zoos. So I climbed up on top and then started to try to lower myself into this field. None of them would give way. Nobody would make any room for me, which I thought was rude. And I shoulder my way into this herd of snorting beasts. And I realized that rather than making, growing bored with my presence, the introduction of my person onto their territory was sort of electric. Okay? And everyone started, like, these snorts start to turn into little nips. And then like these little hooves start to come up and these bovine creatures start jumping, right? And there's like an occasional like leaping into the crowd, and I'm starting to be very aware that there are about 12 beasts who weigh about 500 pounds each starting to like press in on my person. And for the second time that day, my body and my brain start to argue. This time my body is winning because my brain is going, well, you probably shouldn't move too quickly because animals can sense fear, right? Just try to move just nonchalantly through this crowd. But my body is aware that every pair of eyes in this paddock is on me. And in fact, they're starting to like trot and then gallop towards me. And I was a track and field star in high school. My legs knew what to do with 100 yards and a hurdle at the end. I took off at a dead sprint, threw myself over this fence, and as I'm going, like nipping at my heels, these beasts, throwing themselves at the grate in my wake, like they're furious. And I still can't figure out what the hell just happened. But when I realized that I hadn't been trampled to death and that I could have been trampled to death, I decided that yes, I had now earned my pint. And I brushed off the mud and I limped over to the pub and opened the door and was greeted by a round of "Olé!" Everyone had been watching me through the window. And the bartender says, come over, I'm going to stand you a pint. And I sit down and he's just got this look of bewilderment on his face. And he says to me then, the most apt description that I have heard to this day, not only of the 30 seconds that I had just been through, but the decade plus of exposure to the academic publishing world. What he said to me was, I just can't understand why someone would willingly lower themselves deliberately into a field of adolescent bulls. Thank you.